All right, so I have a couple different times. My computer and my phone aren't syncing. So I believe it's 6:03 on my iPhone, but 6:02 on my computer, and it's 6:01 on my clock. So either way, we're starting our management system program virtual info session. So thank you, everyone. Before I fully get started, can everyone hear me okay? Can I see a thumbs up? Okay, awesome, fantastic, thank you. So thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to meet with us and to learn more about the Management Assistant Program in the City of Long Beach. My name is Joy Contreras, and you'll meet two of my colleagues, Augusta and Jillian, who are also here on the call. We're hoping that you get a lot of information out of this session, and at the end of it, really excited to apply to one of the best programs that we've ever participated in. So let's go and get started. Because we are on Zoom, of course, I just wanted to remind everyone about some best practices. We are recording this session just so for folks who can't attend one of the 3 info sessions that we're offering, that they could go back and review this webinar or this info session on their own pace. Please be mindful of any background noise. Please stay on mute. If you'd like to speak, raise your digital hand. I'm assuming several of you are comfortable using Zoom at any point, but if you have any question, you could also use the chat feature. And we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. So who are we? Augusta, Julian, and I are all recent management assistants. We tried to find a photo that had all 3 of us, and this is just, pre-COVID. That's something that we're going to start talking about pre-COVID, post-COVID. We're in COVID now, but this was way before the situation that we're currently in. So like I said, my name is Joy Contreras, and we have my colleague Augusta here. Augusta, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Augusta Gudeman. I recently graduated, or I guess it's not so recent anymore, but graduated from the University of Michigan in 2019 with my master's in urban planning and public policy. Go Blue. If there are any 40s out there, happy to see you.
And then we also have our colleague, Julian Cernita. Julian?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Julian. Thank you for being here. Graduate of MPA from USC in 18. Before I was in healthcare, working with the Affordable Care Act in North Carolina. In Augusta, I do see a big yellow M, so I think there's some representation there for you. So looking forward to talking with you guys today.
Awesome. Thank you, Augusta. Thank you, Julian. And for everyone, you'll learn more about their personal and professional experiences, and hopefully that will motivate you all to apply. So just the agenda for today's info session, you're going to learn so much about the great city of Long Beach in California. Fun fact, there are several places in the United States called Long Beach, but this is the one in California, so keep that in mind. You'll obviously learn more about the Management Assistant Program, and we call it the MA program for short. You'll hear our recent alumni experience, as well as the position benefits of the application process, and again, plenty of Q&A, and shout out to all the people who provided me questions prior to the info session, because we're actually going to start off our Q&A with those questions. And now I'm going to hand it off to Augusta to tell us a little bit more about the great city of Long Beach.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm hoping I'm loud enough for you guys to hear me. So we're going to tell you why we love Long Beach and why you should love Long Beach and why it's so exciting. So we have a population of close to 500,000 people, which if you're counting, that means we're just about the same size as Oakland, California, Miami, Raleigh, North Carolina, where I grew up. And so Long Beach is, though often it gets overshadowed by Los Angeles being in the same metro region, it truly is its own city, its own personality, and we're very proud of that. We have a hugely diverse population in our city as well, not only racially and ethnically, though of course we have that. We have the largest population of Cambodians outside of Cambodia, as well as many Spanish-speaking immigrants, many Filipino and South Asian immigrants. So we are ethnically and racially diverse, but also politically, economically, If you look at the map, on one side, we are bordered by Orange County, California, one of the wealthiest areas in the country. And on the other side, we're bordered by Compton, California, which most people know as an area that isn't doing so well and hasn't done so well. So like I said, really, we span the map of kinds of places, and it's a really interesting place to be working in because of these very reasons. We're also a full service city. So what that means, if you're not familiar, it means that we do most of our services, we actually do them ourselves. So rather than contracting it out and having other organizations, other companies, or other governments provide services, we actually do them all ourselves. We have 24 different city departments, over 6,000 employees, and we do a ton of stuff within the city. We have our own health department, which has been really fascinating with COVID and the pandemic. We've been doing direct response, acquiring vaccines, acquiring tests, and standing up testing sites with thousands and thousands of people being tested every day. And we're doing this as a government entity. And, you know, we have our own airport, we have our own port, harbor. And so there's really just an endless number of opportunities and ways to take your career and learn about the way that city operates in a ton of different industries. Our annual budget is about $3 billion. And we also just had our civic center built. It finished and is now being occupied as of last summer. It's probably going to be about a year since any of us have actually worked in the building because, of course, we're following COVID guidelines. But it is a beautiful building and really nice to work in when we're actually there. Next slide, please. Perfect. Okay, so we want to walk you through what this program is. That's what this is all about, to sort of give you as much of a breadth of understanding of what this program is. And we're gonna zero in on specific pieces that are on this slide later on, but we do like to have kind of everything summarized here on this one slide to just show you sort of the key highlights. So it's a one-year rotational program in city management. It's made up of 4 department rotations that last 3 months each. So every 3 months you shift to a new rotation. And it also includes a 2-week orientation at the beginning of the program to the entire city. And that's really important and interesting because you really get to, you meet with every single department and learn everything about it. And I really didn't appreciate or see the value of that orientation until like much later. Even now, I'm seeing how just getting that introduction to everything is hugely helpful down the line. And it's something that nobody else in the city, not even a new city manager, would get. So that's really unique that you get to do that. You get access and exposure to city leadership, and this is in so many ways. You get one-on-one mentorship that is both formal in that you have a mentor who is a director of the city and you meet with them monthly for the entire year. So free coffee and meals if you're into that too. You also end up being sort of courted by a lot of people, and you're actively encouraged to court others, meaning, you know, people are going to reach out to you and want to hear about you and share with you about themselves. And that'll be like bureau managers, it'll be directors. And you're also actively encouraged to reach out to anybody that you're interested in learning about their career, what they do and the skills they look for. So lots of coffees and meetings with people and just sort of general exposure to the city and just soaking up as much as you can and as much as you can learn. And so what you'll see is that it's almost like a fire hose of learning that you're trying to drink from, because there's also tons of training and development opportunities. There are conferences that happen yearly, workshops that you might attend or be a part of. So you're just going to be learning and having a lot of training opportunities throughout the whole year. We'll talk about this over and over. You'll hear us say it again and again, but It really does position you for continued deployment, not only with the city, but even beyond, outside of the city, within the region. And there's a really strong alumni network of past management assistants throughout the city and elsewhere. Next slide. So why the management assistant program? A huge feature of it is that you are fast tracking your future in local government management. This is one of the longest running programs around municipal management in the nation. It's been running since 1981, and it's hard to overstate why that's so valuable, because every single year and the longstanding nature of the program means that the entire city is bought into the program and understands the value of bringing in really great talent, nurturing that talent, and understanding the value that then we management assistants bring to the city. Management assistants are exposed to high priority city projects, and we can talk about this a little bit later in the question and answer if people are interested, but there's criteria around what specific projects get picked for management assistants to work on. And one of the criteria is that it is a high priority project. It's a high priority for the community, it's a high priority for the city, and it's a high priority for the department. And so you are going to be, it is required that you are going to be exposed to very important projects and things that are going to expose you and build skills for you. And so that's really valuable. You are going to build professional experience that leads into managerial roles. You work closely with managers. You're exposed to meetings and conversations that a lot of people are not exposed to. And so you start to understand, what are the things that these leaders are thinking about? What are their concerns? What are the issues? And that exposure is just really important in your own career and development. Lastly, the whole city, like I said, is bought into the program, but especially starting at the top, people are invested in you, they're invested in the program. And, our current city manager, Tom Modica, is a former management assistant himself. And he's invested in seeing the program continue. And so that really does make the program really valuable and really just improves the quality. All right, so digging into the 4 rotations a little bit more, everyone who goes through the program will rotate 3 months through the city manager's office and 3 months through the budget office. So the reason these are required is because they're kind of the bread and butter of what being in a municipal government is about. In the city manager's office, you get exposed to the political side of things, understanding how the city manager has to balance working with city council, working with departments, working with the community to try to bring about the best outcomes. And then you get the financial side of things, working with the budget office, understanding how they put things together and how that is such a critical process every year. And then there are 2 additional rotations, and these vary by the year. They depend on the current needs of the city. And, there has been a wide breadth. We've listed a couple of the departments that management assistants have been assigned to over the last couple years. And just so you have a flavor of what those rotations might look like. And a little later on, we're going to talk about Julia and Joy and I, what our experiences were like as management assistants. So that'll give you a little more idea and detail about what that was like. All right, next slide, perfect. So typical assignments, there really isn't a typical day in the life. That's part of what this whole experience is about, is to understand, what is it like to be a leader in a local government? And the truth is there is no one typical day. But to give you a sense of the kinds of projects and the kinds of things you might be involved in and asked to do. So every week you attend the city manager directors meetings. That's where all of the directors meet and talk about the hot topics of the day, the items that really need to be addressed and that are kind of these wicked problems. Within your rotations, you might be asked to look at a current city policy or current city procedure, analyze it, look at what we've done in the past, look at other case studies, make recommendations. You might be writing a memorandum from directors or to directors, to the mayor, to city council, and preparing correspondence to them. You might be researching best practices, preparing presentations, giving presentations. If you're familiar with local government, you know that requests for proposals are a primary mechanism that we use to ask for services and partner with private organizations to deliver services to the city. And the RFP, developing the RFP is a whole science and art in and of itself, so you might be involved in that. You might attend community meetings, conduct site visits, and also coordinate management assistant alumni events, because you'll find that management assistants, we get together every couple times throughout the year to reconnect and share our stories. And so just to dig in a little bit more into kind of getting a flavor of what it looks like to be a management assistant. This is actually a screenshot from early on in my management assistant year. And what it really shows you is that you're going to be in meetings all the time. 75% of my time, I would say, was in meetings. And then it was the rest of the time that I had to do the work that, that I was being asked to do. And one thing to really understand before you come in is that this is a demanding program. You are not going to be sitting around bored. You are going to be working on a ton of different projects at any one time. And sometimes there will be demanding deadlines, but you really are getting exposed to a ton of different things. So just wanted to give you a sense of, what you should expect when you come into the program. All right. So just to give you, like I said, we'll sort of dig into what each of us experienced as management assistants. So my name is Augusta. I started in July 2019 and officially ended my rotation in June 2020. So you'll hear that actually all three of us, funnily enough, had kind of an odd rotation. So we talked about how there are 4 rotations. Well, all 3 of us, oddly enough, and we're the only ones who this has ever happened to, had a 6-month rotation. And so for the Census 2020, it was a huge topic, a huge priority for the city because it determines so many things around federal funding and like for decades to come, the funding that comes back to the city. The census is crucial for that. It's also crucial for political representation down the line. And so we were assigned to assist actually Julian, who was the project manager last year on that, and help get the word out. So in my first 6 months with the city, I was helping develop community partnerships, develop partnerships with the state and the county and the Census Bureau itself and start building and designing the framework for what we would actually be doing to get the count out in Long Beach. So that was a huge learning experience. Then I went to the budget office and started learning about that for about 2 months. Then COVID hit. I was supposed to go to development services and work with the planning office, but I was actually pulled into the city's emergency operations center, working in procurement around the emergency. And I ended up actually getting my job offer now, and where I currently work is in financial management in the Business Services Bureau, which includes the purchasing division, where we do those RFPs that I talked about, and also business licensing office. So I am doing analyst and program specialist work within that bureau now.
Awesome. Thank you, Augusta. And this is me, Joy Contreras, when I had shorter hair. And pandemic is longer hair as it goes. So I started off my journey in the management assistant program in the public works office, handling their records management system. As you'll probably notice in any local government or just government in general, there are a lot of processes and procedures, and sometimes those are really well documented. Other times they are not, or there's opportunities for those to be really well documented and streamlined. So I was brought in to help tackle that problem. I then rotated through the budget office and really learned how the planning of a new budget fiscal year starts. So in the city of Long Beach, we actually follow an October 1st through September 30th fiscal year. And then like Augusta, so she did the first 6 months with a lot of the strategic planning. And then I came in and, took the baton and helped Julian's project in the Census 2020 efforts by really focusing on volunteer engagement, volunteer community outreach marketing. And with or like she said, with the pandemic, that really had to change. There was about a week where we just really needed to sit down and think about okay, what does census outreach look like in a global wide pandemic? So that's been one heck of a ride, and we could tell you a lot more about that. But now that the census is over with, and we're very happy to see our hard work, and we're excited to see what those numbers are. My supervisor, now director, who was also a management assistant alumni 14 years ago, he offered me a position in public works so I could continue with that records management. But now we're calling it a digital transformation, because in addition to getting a hold of our records and our data, it's also about what sort of tools are we using to collaborate from remote work. And that's kind of been a really huge shift in local government and for us this year. So I'm excited to be part of that project. Julian?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for joining us today. Hopefully you found the information so far helpful. If not, there's time for questions at the end as well. But very quickly about me, I'm from the 2018-2019 cohort. So just a year before Augusta and Joy. My rotations were at the police department. I spent 6 months there helping to essentially set up the body-worn camera project. So what that kind of entailed of, and before I keep going, I'll say I had no idea I was going to go to the police department. I had no prior safety experience or knowledge. So that's kind of one of the cool things I think about the rotation programs, is that you in a way kind of get thrown into these really interesting and high priority projects, and you have to learn very quickly, and then get settled in, and then start to produce results. So that's kind of what I attempted to do at the police department. So there I kind of was in charge of developing and then eventually recommending basically infrastructure about how to store and then also make public body-worn camera video, and making sure that it complied with all the privacy laws. For example, making sure that any personal identifiable information, like for example, a minor's face, maybe a victim of a crime, was essentially, making sure that was removed from the video that was made public, and also making sure that the police department met all the requirements around releasing that video within a certain amount of time. So all that was very new to me. But it was very interesting. I learned so much, particularly because as is often the case, the police department is a large section of the general fund, meaning the tax dollars, all of the tax dollars go to that department. So it's really interesting seeing how that level of funding was utilized in a department that is fairly large, both in resources, financially, and also in staff, sworn and non-sworn. So that was really interesting for me. And also attending, high-level meetings at the department was also, very informative, very interesting, brand new world for me. Also, local government in general was newer for me too at the time. So that was really really cool, and it's really interesting to once see kind of your project cross the finish line. Last year during the budget process, it was really cool to see my recommendation actually make it to the budget proposal level of the department and getting approved. So, please know that, at the end of the day, you can make, really cool, really good difference for your community or even for that department internally as well. So after that rotation, I went to the budget department, budget office, which is in financial management. And there, it depends kind of in what cycle you land during the budget process. So in my budget process rotation, I was helping the budget office kind of close out the year previously. So making sure that everything was making sense, all the numbers were coming together. And then the other larger piece that I helped them do was essentially projecting revenue for specific funds. Like for here in Long Beach, we focus a lot on TOT or basically the hotel tax revenue. So seeing how we came in on that. Also touching with kind of what Augusta said earlier about us being a full service city. So we even dig up oil from the ocean, and I know that may be controversial, but it's something that we're doing right now as a city. So also helping the city understand kind of what that revenue looked like from that end. So that was really interesting. Again, anything from ambulance fees, recuperating those, to oil and the barrel per day that we're expected to get revenue from that. And that was only in 3 months. So it was really interesting to help create those projections for that year, which then in turn helps the budget office and then the city understand what the level of funding that we have to kind of use to go about doing our business. So that was a really good experience. And after that, I went right into the city manager's office. And I won't talk too much about the census because I know Augusta and Joy already did. But that is when I started working on the census project. I consider myself fortunate that it just happened to be, one of those decades or years where the census was happening. So I started working with the deputy city manager who was in charge of that project, essentially helping to create a strategic approach to that project, and then also going about setting an implementation plan, which has a lot of different components, working internally with our many departments to make sure we all identified resources that could be pointed to this project, and also working with our external partners, from all sectors of our community, hospitals, the school systems, universities, small businesses, and just about 45, I think it was, organizations. So that eventually, for me, I had the opportunity to continue that project, and I decided to do that. So I stayed at the city manager's office, working on that project until recently, this past October 15th, after a lot of turmoil on the federal level and unknowns. The deadline happened on October 15th. So we still wrapping that project up, almost done. But now recently become a special projects officer, helping with the deputy city manager on administration, working with the ethics commission and also other special projects as they arise at the city manager's office. So there's a bit from my end. Next slide. So what I want to talk to you about is basically what happens after the program and then the benefits of the program itself. So as you can kind of tell from Joy's and Augusta and my experiences, I don't want to be like, the sky's the limit, but there are a lot of different opportunities for management assistants afterwards. And that's because there's a lot of work that needs to get done here in Long Beach. So as you can see, those are some of the positions where people kind of evolve into after the management assistant program. And I won't get into specifics and the roles of each position, but what I will do when I share with you is that these positions are, fairly high level, and it's what I want to impart on you is that the management assistant program really serves as a catalyst to get you to these kinds of positions right after the management assistant program. And if you're not too familiar with like the classifications of a city, when you see kind of the number 3, for example, planner 3, admin analyst 3, that means that you've had to go through a series of progressive positions to get there. And what I do want to underscore is that as a management assistant, you essentially speed past that process and start, for example, as an admin analyst 3. And that amounts to, could be years on your public service career where you start kind of ahead of the pack. and because of that exposure that you've been getting. So just keeping that in mind, that's I think one of the big benefits of the management assistant program there. And these are just 4 examples. And even within these examples, there's a very wide variety of responsibilities within each one. Next slide. The other cool thing also that both Joy and Augusta kind of alluded to is really that you don't just have a job at the City of Long Beach as a management assistant, is that you join almost like a family of staff that is there to support you. And because they want to see you succeed. I wanted to see Augusta and Joy succeed, and I wanted them to have a good experience. And that's because there's a network of alumni here that want to make sure you have a good experience, and that it's the experience is so good that you want to stay here and that you learn and grow. So, not only that, but as you can see, after becoming a management assistant and the previous positions that I've kind of talked about, management assistants here, grow to become and play really big roles in the city. So you can see there's just some of the examples there. And right now we're just fortunate to see, I guess one of the best examples is that Tom Modica, current city manager, actually started as a management assistant. So that's really cool to see, someone that is an alumni be like, oh, wow. So like, you told me that if, I work really hard and do good work, like I could become city manager someday, at a city. So it kind of paints a path and paths for you while you're an MA and even a recent alum. Oh, and one last point on that slide is something I always thought about too was like, okay, so I'm here at the City of Long Beach. Does that mean, can I stay? Do I go? And the short answer is that you can really take that experience anywhere. You can go to a different state, you can go to a different city, and there are alumni really in all levels of government and even the private sector. So don't think that, if you want to be a management assistant, that just kind of stays here, because the program has so much staying power. It's recognized and known, in many different levels of government. So, thanks, Joy. So I'll talk about 2 big points on this one. One is the mentorship. I think the mentorship, at least for me, was, I would say, one of the biggest things that the program has to offer, because management assistants that are alumni, are so happy to sit down with you, and not even just management assistants that were, alumni, but also any staff. As a management assistant, you basically have a free ticket to ask people to sit down with you and to talk to you and learn about what they're doing. And it helps to really inform what you want to do and where you want to go. So I think that's a really big one, is that mentorship opportunity there. And you have mentorship opportunities, both formal ones that are set up. For example, you'll have a director mentor and you have a bureau mentor, but you also just naturally develop informal mentorships through your program as you go. And those are also really nice to have, because you're able to have good conversations that go just beyond the surface level information, and people really open up and want to help you and share their experience with you, so that you can also make an informed decision on what you want to do with your professional development. And the other piece, of course, especially now, money is important. We definitely know that. We all know that. So the position would pay is about $58,724. And on the boring end is, but very, very important, is that the position does, come with the CalPERS pension for people that are out of state, essentially the pension here in California. So boring, but very important, right? And also is a full benefits packet, which includes vision, dental, and health. Again, boring, but extremely important. So definitely wanted to make sure that you guys knew about that piece. Next slide. Yes, so when Joy and Augusta were looking at this earlier, I started laughing because of the big kind of sign that says start preparing your application early. Definitely encourage you all to do that. Unlike myself, who waited, I won't tell you the timestamp on it, but it was not, I wish it was earlier. So please don't do what I did. Spend time with your application. You can see that the materials are included. Just some quick kind of highlights here. don't think because you don't have an MPA or an MPP or MHA or anything like that that you're not a good candidate or shouldn't apply. I would say that the city, the leadership looks at the management assistant program as a way to channel new talents, maybe unconventional talents that people do not necessarily have to come from a local government background for any government background. So don't rule yourself out just because you don't have what you would think a typical master degree is. Definitely encourage you to not do that to yourself. And looking at the materials that need to be included in the packet, please read the instructions really carefully. Human resources is human resources. So we want to make sure that you prepare your packet as good as you can, and then really even spend time with it, because it is a competitive process. So if you're able to share what you're working on with other people, with your colleagues and friends, to sharpen the edges, please take that time to do so. So starting early is critical. So we do definitely recommend that. And a quick timeline overview here. So you guys have about a little bit over a month until the application deadline of January 19th. Please write that down. And after that, basically what happens is that you have a series of steps that occur. If your application continues to move forward, there are several steps. The first round is a video montage, which essentially you're asked to respond to, I think, 2 or 3 questions via video. So you are timed on that, for example, but you are asked to do that. Then that is then reviewed by leadership here at the city. And there's a second round of also screenings and checks and references, for example. After that is what's called the assessment center, which when I went to an information session a couple of years ago, kind of scared me a little bit. But it's essentially is a series of interviews by leadership here in the city, and you're interviewed, and then you also have to participate in a series of exercises to basically assess your writing skills and your quantitative skills. So it's a little intense, but I also had a lot of fun. So it just kind of depends, on the person. So think about being always on your toes and under pressure, and then kind of that kind of setting. So it's very similar to that. And then, meeting new people and, sharing kind of your story and your skill sets with them at the same time. So again, January 19th is a big date. That's when it kind of starts. So just, again, really, really big deadline, January 19th, a little bit over a month. Again, I can't stress that I think leadership and then people that review the application want to see that diversity in the applicant pool. So again, don't rule yourself out if you don't have government background or an MPA or an MPP, anything along those lines. There's information for you, longbeach.gov/jobs website, so you can learn more about the management assistant program and the application itself. And then please know that we are always available to you to answer any questions now or in the future up to the deadline. So I think with that piece, that brings us into time for questions. And I believe Joy is going to be leading us with that. I know we saw some questions coming into the chat box and earlier ones.
Yes. Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Augusta, for presenting to us all this amazing information. And like Julian, I won't tell you my timestamp, but I highly recommend that you take a lot of the time to make sure you get in your applications early. All right, so we do have some pre-questions, but we're gonna tackle the ones in the chat first. I believe the first one came from Taylor, and they had a question about, would you only recommend the program for those that plan to stay in the city area beyond the year? Since Augusta and Julian were both from out of state, would one of you like to take that question?
I think that that's a hard question. I think the goal or the hope is that even if you came in thinking that you would leave, that you would fall in love with the city and decide to stay. Of course, the city invests so much time and energy, resources into us because they do want to nurture talent for the organization. You know, it's part of, you know, it's an important part of a human resource succession planning, thinking about the future of the organization is really investing in your talent and in your human resources. So, you know, I guess I wouldn't say, since I consider myself a part of the community now, I wouldn't say, oh, I actively encourage somebody who knows that they're going to be there for a year and then leave. You know, the goal is to bring in people who are going to contribute to the city, contribute to the community, and you know, hopefully do that for a while. So it's kind of a non-answer, but I hope that gives you a little bit more of a background on what, you know, what the goal of the program is.
And I'll be very quick too and just look at it from a different angle, and that is, you know, basically on the professional development angle. I alluded to earlier, after the management assistant program, you're able to basically catalyze yourself to positions, you know, higher level positions. And, you know, it's easier and, you know, to do that in the same organization, because at this point they know you, your supervisors, your managers that were, you know, helping you through these programs for this 1 year, they know who you are, they know your work, and they know you're going to come through. So in many ways, it makes sense to stay here to see that potential actually manifest itself, because you have such a good leg up for being here for that 1 year. It's essentially like a 1 year interview process that you're getting such high level exposure to leadership, then that it makes so much sense to remain here to continue that expedited growth, because it's not a guarantee that you know that may happen in another organization, because they just don't know your work. And then the second piece is, I think equally as important, is that Long Beach is just a really cool place to be. You know, I'm not from here, you know, I grew up in North Carolina, but it is a great place to work and to live in. You know, I mean, the residents here are just really cool, and, you know, working for really creative and interesting people, and people that want to do well and good in their communities and neighborhoods. Kind of gives you that extra energy to want to keep working here. And again, you know, well, not and again, but the beach is kind of like right there too. So, and the weather is nice, which, coming from a place that we have winters, it's not a bad thing to have as well.
Ditto. I'm from Long Beach, so Long Beach is great. The next question here, I think, Julian, you could probably help us answer. Is this program only open to American citizens?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would just reach out to HR about that. And Augusta, correct me if I'm wrong. HR told us that this position is available to anyone that has a work authorization here in the United States. So what that means is that you can be a US citizen, you can be a permanent resident, you can be someone that's received like temporary protected status or you know, DACA status. As long as you are able to work in the United States, then we're absolutely willing to you know, look at your application and consider you as a candidate.
One just small clarification that I know is disappointing to some people is that we're not able to, or we're not in the position to sponsor visas. And so if you are a student that does need a visa to continue working, then unfortunately that likely means you aren't eligible.
Thank you, Augusta. Thank you, Julian. The next question here we have in the chat was, how are the other 2 rotations determined? So I could answer that. When Augusta was reviewing the 2 mandatory as well as the other departments, I think maybe at some point in the program, long time ago, candidates were able to select their departments, but now they go through a mini RFP process here. So the city manager requests projects from different departments, and then depending on the high priority projects that are existing for that fiscal year, that's how they're selected. But they also look at some of the experience that you may bring, and not necessarily like, oh, you've worked in the health department, like health related initiatives, therefore we're going to put you in the health department. Kind of like what Julian said when he was talking about his experience. He didn't have any prior public safety experience, but he was still placed in police department because of his analysis, his research, all of his experience prior to working with the city of Long Beach. So that is assigned to us, so we don't have any say in, but I think that really creates the experience of the program. It really enriches your perspective. Can people who receive their master's degree outside of the US apply for the program? I believe that is a yes. I know Christian and I, who's another management assistant alumni, when we presented at USC, we received this question and we believe so. I will double check, but as long as you have a master's degree by June 2021, basically at the start of the program, that's what's required. Let's see here. Another question in the chat was, when does the assessment center portion of the evaluation occur? So in that timeline, we have it occurring in May, April, May. That's when it typically is. In terms of what it will look like in this pandemic state, we are actually unsure. We won't know until the city management really determines what the returning back to City Hall strategy looks like. So we'll have more information, and hopefully for the folks who make it to that point, you'll have much more clarification. Ooh, okay, I'll pick Augusta for this one. Can you all share some of your favorite tasks and projects and why? And then after Augusta, Julian, you could go.
That's a tough one. So I actually kind of want to talk about the project I'm currently on, which isn't technically a management assistant project, but it definitely could be at some point, or could have been at one point. And so maybe this will still sort of get to the spirit of your question. So as I mentioned, I'm working in the Business Services Bureau of the Financial Management department, and most of my work is focused on the purchasing division. And when I tell friends that I'm working in government procurement now, their eyes sort of glaze over, and I understand, like, immediately it's like, okay, that sounds really boring. But actually, if you think about it in the way that, you know, government can do a lot, but there are many, many things that we're just not equipped to do. Like, think creating a software system to help us manage all the incoming requests for like potholes and yada, yada, yada. That's a very small example, but there are just some things we can't do. And so we have to partner with the private sector in order to do that. And we do that through our purchases. So we buy a bunch of goods and we contract for a ton of services. And purchasing is the function that allows us, it's the mechanism to actually do that. And it's a pain point across all governments pretty much, because it's a very kind of opaque bureaucratic process, and yet it's so fundamental to having the entire city function. And I was lucky enough to be, kind of in the right place at the right time. The managers that I have this vision for just transforming the purchasing function, and really trying to do away with barriers. So there are a whole host of things, right? There's like internal city departments and customer service when it comes to making the process more efficient and transparent for them. And then there's the whole vendor and business community and trying to make the process more transparent, fair, competitive, equitable for them. And we have a lot of work to do on both sides of that. So part of the work and part of the projects I'm getting to look at and work on are, how can we remove barriers for people who and businesses who have traditionally been excluded, whether by virtue of just not being a part of the networks that get the notifications that the opportunities are there, or because the awards are just too big for their current capacity, or because they are a disadvantaged business that has traditionally been excluded from capital that you need to be able to compete for the type of opportunities that governments are offering. And then of course, internally, there's a whole host of other issues with purchasing. And so just sort of getting to like take apart these really tricky issues and try to get at the heart of sort of moving the needle a little bit is really fascinating. And like I said, totally within the spirit of something that a management assistant would be asked to do. So long-winded answer, but I hope it was interesting. Julian, I bet you have some a good example too.
Yeah, I mean, the census came to mind obviously as a whole thing, but I want to focus more on, I think how cool it is to go through this experience with a cohort, you know, with other management assistants. And I forgot to mention that piece, which is why I want to loop it back in. I think that's the other huge benefit is that you're not, you know, it's not just you, it's you plus some other MAs like side by side, literally, you know, almost living together, especially around the budget process, because you go to every council meeting and some of those council meetings run a very long time. And, you know, I guess that's one of the tasks or projects, but you spend so much time together as a unit. And, you know, like Augusta's not like, oh, that's Augusta, that's Joy, like, oh, she's an MA. She's, you know, it's like you kind of almost move in a unit because people always see you together. They see you at the council meetings. They see you in the director's meeting. They see you doing a presentation. They see you doing recruitment. They see you, you know, around town. So you're just, I think for my cohort, that was a really amazing experience to have like a group of people that you have this shared experience with, you know, going through thick and thin and trying to figure it out. I mean, you know, trying to figure out how to get something done. And you're like, hey, do you know anybody that does this or who does that? Who, you know, having people to lean on essentially, I think was one of the really cool parts from my experience. And although each of us have you know, a unique experience because we're going to different departments, and even when we go to the same department, they're in a different place when everybody gets there. You still kind of have that really cool shared experience with, you know, with your cohort that only you guys know what it's like. So I would say that that was a big plus on my, you know, on my end, on my experiences, having a really, you know, close group of really smart, talented people, and then becoming friends, you know, through that process. So that was, and seeing each other grow. So that was really cool to see happen.
Yeah, thank you, Julian. Thank you, Augusta. And that's actually a great segue to the next question that someone had here in the chat, which is approximately how many people will be considered for the upcoming cohort? And typically, and Julian, Augusta, feel free to chime in. Typically, it's 4 cohort members. We know in the past there has been 1, there's been 2, or even 3. I think it might depend on the number of priority projects, but also whether or not the city is in lean times, which I can imagine this year and for the next couple of years will be in lean times. So we're not exactly sure, which makes it a lot more competitive, right? Oh, this is a good question. How have you all personally and the organization at large adapted to the challenges of COVID? Oh, well, working remotely was never well, I'll just start that off, was never an option for anyone. And I think not just local government, but there's a lot in the workplace, that whole shift of, can you be productive? You know, can you be trusted working from home? That has definitely shifted, at least in my experience and as well as my department experience. There's a lot of faith in the workforce to be productive and be really flexible, especially with so many working parents now having to be at home with their kids doing remote learning. I think the working from home is greatly appreciated in terms of what that might look like when we go into the new year, 2021. We're not quite sure, but here's hoping to a hybrid strategy. That would be fantastic. I know that way Long Beach has definitely adapted For me personally, mental health is the utmost importance. I can't be my best self without my mental health. So I'm really lucky to have really great supervisors who understand that. And having Julian as one of my supervisors and Gus as one of my coworkers, I think we're all on the same page about, we're going to get the work done. We're going to do what it takes, but, at what cost? And that means we need to take care of ourselves, because then how else can we care about the projects and, our residents? Julian, Augusta, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I was going to add something. I love this question, so thank you so much to Mario. And, I think about this all the time, actually, and I think we're still going to be trying to understand how COVID impacted us 5 years from now and 10 years from now. It's hard to overstate just how much it has impacted the city. Just to the first couple things that came to mind, and I'll try not to ramble on and on, but the entire city structure was fundamentally shifted as COVID started ramping up in March. We created almost a ghost structure called the Emergency Operations Center that probably a quarter of the city's workforce actually got pulled into at one point or another. A whole new structure that was just rapidly deployed and made to immediately stand up an incredible number of operations, like housing homeless we'd never offered sheltering before in this way, acquiring real estate and permits and leases to stand up these operations, running testing sites, et cetera, et cetera. It was just the largest organizational logistical challenge. And like I said, it's just going to continue. It's going to be studied. People will write their dissertations on this. And it was fascinating hearing, when you start throwing people together in new ways, different things come out. And I was never personally embedded. I wasn't showing up to the Emergency Operations Center, though I was a part of it. And I was hearing things about how police and fire were having to, they were being put in positions and being put together on teams in ways they never had before, and starting to duke it out, who has more power. Just really interesting dynamics like that that have come out. And now in my daily work, everything I do is a challenge, and everything I do is related to COVID, because one of the really big challenges that the city is facing with now is we have $40 million of CARES funding that is going to expire in 2 weeks-ish. And expending those funds is, again, a huge logistical challenge that we're still working through. And there is going to be some aid from the federal government in the form of FEMA reimbursements. But again, the hoops that you have to jump through in order to get that reimbursement is just ginormous. And so it's everything we do is heightened. We all are sort of have multiple workloads that we're dealing with, all because of COVID.
Yeah, thank you so much, Augusta. Can everyone tell that she's a procurement queen? I love that. So we are at time, but the three of us are willing to stay on for another 5 to 10 minutes to answer any sort of pressing questions here. I just did want to wrap up on some of the logistical questions that someone had. If you're still in grad school, yes, you could still apply as long as you have your master's degree by the time the program starts. In terms of the timing, I know there are different programs that end at different times. I don't know the answer to that yet, but we can get back to you. So I noted who made that question, and I will follow up with you. And let's see here. Actually, I wanted to ask both Julian and Augusta, what tips would you give folks who are on the fence about applying, who, they're probably at a current job or they've applied to different places before, but this seems like the most different or out there for them? What sort of advice would you give to prospective candidates?
Let's see here. I'm the kind of person that always asks myself, why not? And if I don't come with a good enough answer to not do it, then I do it, basically. So, you know, and also because it just depends on your approach to things. So also because I could not live myself if I was interested or wanted to do something and then decided not to. I'd hate to look back and be like, man, you know, what if I would have done this? What if I would have done that? In Spanish, there's a really cool saying that I told Joy about the other day. It's like, el hubiera no existe, which is like the what if, coulda, woulda, shoulda doesn't exist. So, you know, you might as well just go for it, give it a go. And then also when I was applying, I was like, man, they're making me do so much. Once I submit it, I'm gonna have like every document possible to apply to other positions in case I don't get it. So in a way, it kind of like forces you to get all your ducks in a row for other you know, possibilities that you're interested in as well. So I guess it's more like a high level approach to it. But, you know, I think I'll already say this, so I'll say it again because I think it really is important. It is a competitive process. And because of that, you know, you really should take your time with it. And the biggest kind of advice that I got when I was asking this question and that I would give and will give today is just to make sure that you that you translate yourself and who you are in the responses in those questions. I think people here are amazing and they're very smart, very talented, very capable, but people here like to work with other human beings. You know, we don't like to work with robots. We like to laugh and joke and have a good time and work together, you know, whether it's at 2 o'clock at a council meeting or, you know, for lunch or coffee. And I think that's what is a really good advice that I got and that I would want to impart to everyone here is to, you know, be yourself and leave a little bit of yourself, share a little bit of yourself with you to with those that review the application through those responses that you're able to provide. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think you covered it all, Julian. So I don't have much to add. Yeah, to Julian's point about really making, you know, leaving a little bit of who you are. You know, I'm sure you'll hear this all the time from your university career people. And I remember hearing this advice and just getting frustrated because I was like, what does this mean? But, you know, like have your personal brand and know how to sell yourself. And like I said, I've really struggled with that. But it is a good way to sort of encompass that you, in order to differentiate yourself, in order to have people who are reading your application materials understand where you're coming from, you know, you kind of have to curate your life and curate your experiences and your interests and let people know what you're bringing to the table. So personally, I found the job search experience to be a bit of like a soul searching thing because it's like, well, you know, what do I think I am really good at? And what is it that I really want to be doing with my career? And working really hard to try to bring that out in my application materials to say, like, these are my specific skills that when I've noticed when I'm, you know, in a group, like this is kind of where I stand apart. So that's it. Sort of generic advice, but it's helpful here too.
Well, that's excellent advice, Augusta, and thank you, Julian. What I would just say is now's the great time, I personally believe, to join local government. I believe that although trust in government in general, as you may see on the national scene, may be really low, I see that the interest in government and processes has never been higher, and really holding all of our officials and accountable and really giving the voice to community members and being able as a Long Beach native to do that and to facilitate that either in one little way or a bigger way has been such a fulfilling experience. And I look forward to continuing that and bringing people on board who also want to do the same thing because we ultimately serve the people. So how can we best deliver our services, our programs, our communication, everything to them that is equitable and fair. And, you know, darn it, I'm going to keep doing it until I figure it out. And luckily, I have really awesome colleagues like Augusta and Julian to really tackle that problem together. But it's so great to be part of this coalition of the willing, which one of our MA alumni managers likes to coin, is that you'll find a lot of people who are just as passionate and out there in trying to change our little world, because then, you know, in our little government and city of Long Beach, that has that positive ripple effect, excuse me. Alrighty, it's already, well, again, my clock says two different things, 7:06, 7:07, 7:08. So if there aren't any last minute questions here in the chat, I hope all of you found some value, some reassurance, maybe some motivation and confidence to start your application early and to apply by January 19th, 11:59 p.m. For those of you who do make it, and hopefully we'll have a virtual happy hour, Julian and I will reveal when we submitted our applications. But in the meantime, all of you will turn them in early, and we're looking forward to, you know, seeing this amazing applicant pool, and we look forward to hopefully working with some of you soon in the new year. Thank you so much.